Brief introduction and agenda. My name's Dave Ginsberg, and I'll be giving a little bit of a corporate overview, not too much, and where we've been the last 6 months or so. The meat of the presentation begins with Alessandro, a technology update on both the Netvisor, some of the use cases, and our deployment strategies. What you're really looking for is Sune, those of you remember him from last time, going deep in terms of wireless analytics, something very unique we want to share with you today called Fabric Connect, and then some of the stuff we've been doing on OpenStack deployment and making OpenStack easier to deploy. In fact, I just came down at lunchtime from Intel IDF up in San Francisco, and a lot of interest in SDN, NFV, and the OpenStack ecosystem. We have a live customer here, Noah from Cloudflare. They use our products globally, and he'll share with you some of their deployment strategies, challenges, and how they overcome them. Then we'll go into, I'll call it closed session. Alessandro's going to be sharing with you some of the upcoming details on Netvisor 2.2, and then we'll take it from there. So, where have we been over the last 6 months or so, and where are we going? Pluribus Networks, we were started over 4 years ago, top-line VCs in Silicon Valley. We're up to about 85 employees, and the talent we have on the software, hardware side, on both the compute and the networking side from the usual suspects. A lot of people are trying to characterize the SDN space. And one way of looking at it is a continuum from companies that really only look at the switching capabilities and have really looked at that as their strategic intent in the market, to companies that are over, further to the right of the ecosystem, not only looking at hypervisors, but how to bring in the application environment as well, and fusing together these various aspects of the technology. And that's where you're going to hear from us today. So it's really a fusion of the networking, the server or compute capability, the application programmability, and the bare metal network hypervisor that's really fundamental to our strategy that I'll talk about in detail. We're also really the beneficiary of a fundamental transformation in the data center space, where you're going from closed, we'll call them stovepipe architectures based on ASICs or proprietary operating systems or proprietary approaches, to a more open and interoperable environment. We sometimes draw the analogy, iPhone versus Android, but you're seeing the same thing happen in the networking and compute space. And you hear people talking about disaggregation. That's just one way of looking at really the mega trend here that's influencing us all. And then last but not least, we have deployment experience. We have over 35 customers deployed in over 20, actually about 25 countries globally. So we're getting a lot of runtime experience in mission critical environments at the heart of some service providers, at some Fortune 500s, and some other mid-size enterprises, and we're continuing to grow from there. So I mentioned that we really look at a couple of aspects of where networking's going. And this is very important for the following reason. If you look at a typical data center rack, there are various components that add to the cost. There's the server hardware, there's the virtualization, the network infrastructure, or the top of rack switching, analytics, and your L4 through 7 appliances or virtualized appliances. And what we want to be able to do is to influence all aspects of this, not only the 5 to 7% of the rack cost that goes into the switching infrastructure. That's really just a start. And we're going there with merchant silicon, but we really want to build beyond that. We want to be able to bring in the analytics that you'll hear Sune go into some details on. We want to be able to integrate some of the virtualized appliances on our platform. Once again, introducing service chaining. A big theme of IDF was NFV, network functions virtualization, so we're getting in that space as well. With regards to the actual virtualization and the orchestration of that virtualization, there are evolving architectures, OpenStack, the most well-known, based on open and interoperable technologies, that's really going to reset the bar on the total cost of ownership for an orchestration environment, a private cloud or even a public cloud. And then finally, things we're doing with the likes of Supermicro help us drive down the server costs themselves. And you'll see progressively more advanced and more sophisticated architectures based on microblades, either Atoms or Xeons, and going towards what Intel refers to as rack scale architecture, where we're pushing additional costs out of the server component of the data center rack. So how do we get there? Our vision is an open and converged network hypervisor. And I'll go into details, as I said, on what we mean by this, but fundamentally, we want to consolidate the CapEx and OpEx within the end-to-end IT infrastructure. It's a very, very big target, and it's a very ambitious goal, but we firmly believe we have the proper technology to go and to meet that goal. Fundamentally, the Netvisor is fusing the server side and the compute side. It's really uniquely taking that network infrastructure, taking the network silicon and mapping it into the application space, giving both NetOps and DevOps the programmability they need. We're based on open technologies, and we fundamentally create a virtualized network infrastructure. One important part about this is that this virtualized infrastructure is not only bound to loads that are in a VM environment. And that's a very important point, because there are a lot of classes of applications that run bare metal. So our Netvisor, our network hypervisor, will actually run across a virtualized environment or a non-virtualized environment, because we've successfully mapped what's happening at the network layer, the bare metal network layer, up into the application space, where we're not just an overlay. And that really differentiates ourselves from some of the other types of virtualization architectures that really treat the network as opaque. And we think that's the wrong thing to do. We think if you're going to have a proper network virtualization and application virtualization architecture deployment, you have to have awareness of what's happening on the network with regards to quality of service, with regards to analytics, with regards to what's happening down there at the switching silicon. And there are people trying to push more and more of the networking into the compute, into the virtualization on the compute. And I sometimes look at it in the following way. It's as if I wanted to take a Trident 2 or an Intel Alta Ethernet switch chip and run my ERP and run my CRM and run my web apps on it. You know, that's not the logical thing to do. We want to have the networking silicon do what it does best, and we want to have the compute silicon what it does best. And one of the things that Sune is going to be introducing is a novel and unique way of building network infrastructures that helps to do just that.
But is this a fair slide, though, to compare like to Nutanix or VMware? Because you still need, 40 plus servers in a rack to take advantage. So, what do you see from a storage perspective being used in Pluribus hardware?
So if I look at it, and you'll learn more about our network computing appliance and our various hardware platforms, but we're not trying to replace the traditional storage within network infrastructure or the servers within the network infrastructure. But for network-facing applications, we provide the storage for them and we provide the compute for them. I'm not trying to replace Nutanix, and in fact, in some environments out in the channel, we're partnering with Nutanix, because that's where your general purpose storage and compute loads are. However, we have awareness of what's happening on the storage side, so we can adapt it better to the network. So how do we instantiate, if I can use that word, our Netvisor? We have a class of hardware platforms you'll learn more about. One is the F-Series network computing appliance. This is where we run, say, for example, OpenStack orchestration or virtualized appliances. This is where we have advanced analytics. Later, you'll see what's this opaque thing to the right, which is a next generation spine architecture. We have our server switch, which is really one and the same with what Facebook has brought to the market as their wedge architecture. Same spirit and same paradigm, where we see a need not only to have the more advanced network computing appliance, but something that can be more economic in the top of rack or in a brownfield environment. And we'll tell you more about that. And then finally, we have, with our arrangement with Supermicro, porting the Netvisor onto the microblade architecture. And this is, if I look at Netvisor as being something that's portable across multiple hardware families, this is really the first substantiated example of porting Netvisor onto a third-party hardware platform. On the technology validation side, I sort of jumped ahead and mentioned Facebook Wedge, but it was really interesting going into the market and seeing what they said had to be really a balance between compute and networking resources at the top of the rack and bringing their design into the OCP. And our intent is once that design is fully adopted, once it's available to other vendors, we will be porting Netvisor onto that architecture as well. And this is, I think, further validation of our view that you need to really have a better balance of the compute resources and the switching resources. More recently, at VMworld, you saw the Evo announcements, which sort of lend credence to the fact that people are looking to bring together some of the compute, some of the storage, and some of the networking capabilities in a much more digestible way. So last but not least, where do we go on use cases? The Netvisor enables 4 fundamental classes of use cases that are key to our existing customer deployments and key to our ongoing proof of concepts. 1, fabric virtualization. This is what you get, I'll call it the plumbing, where you can partition the network. Some people call it microsegmentation. You have full visibility, and you can handle a number of L2, L3 architectures. The second, a cloud services controller, where we're taking our Netvisor and our network computing appliances and using it as the basis for what some people would call a cloud in a rack, where we can run the entire OpenStack distribution on the platform. There's some total cost of ownership efficiencies, there's some manageability and deployability efficiencies as well. The third area is network analytics, and this is where you want additional visibility into what's happening in the network, not necessarily with deploying a separate visibility fabric. We have a lot of people, for example, in the financial sector that are interested in doing this. We have timestamping capability as an example. And last but not least, the converged network platform. This is where I mentioned you would be deploying actual applications on top of our Netvisor, virtualized firewalls, virtualized load balancers. We have customers, including TIPCO as an example, that have actually ported their enterprise messaging system, their EMS appliance, actually onto our Netvisor and are selling it successfully into the Fortune 500. So if I look at some of the customers, fabric virtualization, I mentioned Supermicro, who are adopting the Netvisor architecture. Cloud services controller, we have announced partnerships with both Oracle and Red Hat that are both focused on their OpenStack initiatives. High performance network analytics, we're deployed in Stanford School of Electrical Engineering. For those that were here last time, Rolf gave a pretty good customer use case story on it. And Cloudflare, as you'll hear, is heading in this direction. And then finally, a converged network platform, Lucera, in the financial trading space, as well as TIPCO, who I mentioned, an announced OEM customer who actually have ported their applications onto our platform successfully.